I made a YouTube short fairly recently, kind of on this topic. I want to discuss the latest video that Jerry from Fight Commentary Breakdowns released, and it's a Wing Chun guy fighting a Muay Thai guy.
Wow, the Wing Chun guy is very formidable. Look at that.
Now, this isn't any in-depth analysis or anything even close to that. That's a week ago me, not knowing I'm gonna make this a huge video. Let's continue. It's just voicing my dissatisfaction on how annoying this argument really is. Wing Chun just lost. Real Wing Chun. Huh? Wing Chun just won. Fake Wing Chun. Whenever a Wing Chun guy does good in the ring, he's suddenly not a real Wing Chun guy. And I get it, some people just don't like Wing Chun and think it's complete garbage and all they have seen about it is just bad, so they do not accept it as a real thing. But then there's people who want to see, or pretend they want to see Wing Chun in action, and they already know that happy trappy Wing Chun isn't a real thing, so they know that that's not possible. But when they do see Wing Chun win, then they are looking for the flabby dabby Wing Chun. It's like, you know that that doesn't exist, that that's not real, then why do you complain when that isn't there? And the biggest problem with this is, if you look at any Kung Fu style out there, and you take a look at the forms, they all look like weird woo magical stuff. Then you look at the application of that art. Look at Shui Jiao, look at these forms. Looks like weird flabby-dabby forms, Kung Fu-y stuff. And then the application is normal grappling. The forms can all be misconstrued and looked as like weird woo stuff. Then you look at the official application, it looks just like fighting. And it goes for any Kung Fu out there. Look at Hangar, Laogar, look at San Tzu, look at Baji Chuan, look at Bagua, any one of those. And it will look like normal fighting. Because that's what Sanda is, right? That's what Sansho is. That's just full contact fighting. And we know what full contact fighting looks like. These are all specific practices that develop specific skills in this or that area of fighting. But it all is fighting in the end. So yeah, these no true Scotsman fallacies are getting really annoying. Now, with all of this being said, I have my own view on Wing Chun, which is basically that it's a pressure system tailored for getting people against an obstruction, against the wall, against the cage, etc. Evidence for this is overwhelming. Just look at the dummy, the single most iconic piece of Wing Chun equipment. It's simulating person against the wall, unlike the heavy bag where you go all around it. And don't take it from me, you can take it from Greg Nelson and from even Ramsey Dewey.
Marshall Geek sends in a super chat. Thank you very much. He says, pressing against the cage makes Wing Chun make more sense. Yeah, if you can get into a situation pressed up against the cage, or even in your guard, or even in your opponent's guard, where you can maintain essentially the hand-fighting, trapping distance with an opponent, then sure, that makes sense. Hand-fighting and trapping in a fight, it happens like, boom, you're there, and then you're out. And if you try to stick to him, he's going to move, he's going to cut an angle, he's going to take a step back, he's going to shoot under you, something like that. And so it's dynamic. And so about 5% of the time in a MMA fight, for example, you might run into a hand-fighting, trapping situation where a Wing Chun technique might be viable. And 95% of the time, you're going to be somewhere else. But yeah, as you pointed out, if you can find a position, including guard, top and bottom, pressing up against the cage, etc., where you can close the distance and keep it closed for a good long while, then yeah, many of those techniques can certainly come into play.
I'm not a pure anything in fighting. I'm not a pure MMA guy. I'm not a pure jiu-jitsu guy. But if I was to confine myself to a label of a martial artist, I'm most comfortable with saying Kung Fu because that's the first thing that I started doing in terms of martial arts. The foundations of my fighting style lies in Jeet Kune Do, Wing Chun, and White Crane. White Crane, I'd say the least, but still, it was a huge influence on building my foundational techniques, concepts, and preferences in fighting. So with a lot of exploring the Taolu and sparring before I had any access to any gym and trained any martial art formally, I would explore Taolu, explore these arts, and guess what? Go outside with friends, put on gloves, and spar. That's why, even though I'm on this channel very much talking about specific martial arts, these traditional kung fu styles, aikijitsu, aikido, all that kind of stuff, but I've always came from the lens of you need to spar to test this stuff. That was just a given for me from the very beginning. That's why I naturally ended up being in combat sports, simply because I've always been testing what I learned. And what better test than amateur MMA? Later on, then I started exploring Baji Chuan, Bagua, all kinds of stuff. Why I'm saying all of this now is because in that fight, you can barely see any Wing Chun in there. And that's not because I chose not to do Wing Chun or was waiting for a moment to choose Wing Chun. It's that I got a chance to immediately take down my opponent. That's why I won the fight with grappling. Regardless of the win, the bulk of that fight was just grappling. That's like if you're a good boxer and you fight, you take somebody down with an awesome double leg and finish the fight there. That doesn't mean you don't have good boxing. Don't screw around when you're fighting. If you have an advantage, use it. So the same way, the fact that Wing Chun is in my system as a conceptual martial art, if I finish with Jiu-Jitsu, that doesn't mean that this stuff isn't there. I've already made videos on like Wing Chun versus boxing, Jiu-Jitsu wins type thing. That's ridiculous. Because, as I pointed out before, Islam Makhachev did a head kick KO against Volk. That doesn't suddenly mean that Islam doesn't have wrestling because he won by striking. That would be ridiculous. But what we're gonna look at here in this video now is just a tiny little moment and to show how all these specific practices live in minute details, in something that in the grand scheme of things could be viewed as an unimportant moment. But all these conceptual martial arts live in that space. Now you may think whatever you want, but as I said, I'm not a traditional MMA guy. I've in fact actually had only 3 or 4 formal MMA training sessions with proper coaches. We're mostly self-taught guys. We draw influences and training methods from all kinds of martial arts. So this moment that you will see, no matter how banal it might seem, it's directly from my Wing Chun training. And guess what? It's not the flabby, happy, tappy Ip Man movie Wing Chun. Do you guys know that Donnie Yen didn't even do any Wing Chun up until that point for the movie? Which again was Wing Chun specifically tailored for unrealistic movie fights. So holding Wing Chun to this standard of a movie fight is ridiculous. Fighting always looks like fighting. Movies look like movies. Anyway, rambling on for a bit too long, let's get into the little breakdown. Alright, so for most of you that have seen my most recent MMA fight, bulk of my work there was in grappling. I won the fight in second round via submission technique, and there was barely any stuff done in the stand-up. Here I want to go and just slightly analyze a single thing that I did that could be considered and should be considered Wing Chun because that's where it came from. So first you can see that I am trying to keep facing forward and eat up that space in between. So he's moving to the right side of the ring, I'm following. I'm not like circling around. He goes left, I go left. And I'm trying to back him into a corner because that's where I do most of my dirty boxing / Wing Chun stuff. And this is the first time we engage. And now, because it's hard to see here because of the ref, but you can see that that arm didn't hit me. I was angling off and had my head movement, but you can see that our hips, we are hip to hip because I'm jamming into him. Now, this is more of a baji thing than Wing Chun. But here's where Wing Chun comes into play. For the only time in this fight, really, it's this moment. So you can see that our legs, his right leg and my right leg are pretty much in the same position. Kind of looks funny now that I think of it. But that's because I'm bumping. And now the trouble with a lot of Wing Chun practitioners I see is outside of them not being able to bridge the gap, they also have trouble with facing. Because, you know, we've seen countless times where Wing Chun practitioners are completely faced forward, protecting that center line, and then somebody just angles off and clips them like crazy, and they have no answer to it. That's because they don't know how to face. So, as you can see, I'm already facing, and since I jammed him, I stopped his forward momentum, and you'll see he's gonna go back on his back leg. He was gonna do like a hook, but if you can see, my left arm is in the way immediately because I'm jamming and I'm pushing him forward. This is what resulted in him going back because I immediately faced. He's going back. That's the thing about Kung Fu. That's the thing about all these fighting styles. Most of the time, things you see in forms are capturing moments through visual cues. All the forms, I'm sure Alan from In Defense of the Traditional Martial Arts will be able to speak more on this because of his Tai Chi training, but most of the forms we see in Kung Fu are just like pictures of movements, tiny moments that are captured. No form is directly analogous to a technique. It's all concepts. That's how people back in the day used to record fighting into their bodies. So when we look at this, look at my legs. Look how crossed they are. That's all because Wing Chun is in my system. That's really what's taught about your structure. After the hip jam, I turn to face him. That's a very basic Wing Chun idea. And as I turn to face him, I get my arm in the way before his strike hits me. And what happens is I jam his strike with my elbow, which is just a textbook Bong Sao technique. And I make him go back. And I was playing some mind games here. I let my hands go down just to bait him to do something. And then since I jammed once, I thought about jamming another time. And this is a baji thing that I did. So I already made videos on this. And this is essentially the end of what we're going to look at today, because most of the rest of the fight is really done down in the grappling exchanges. And that's where what the fight was in the end. But I wanted to draw attention just to this little moment that, like, for most people that don't do Wing Chun or explore martial arts to this degree, this will be just like a completely unimportant moment of like engaging. All right, so it was a sloppy strike, there was a sloppy defense, and we continued. And that's not something most people want to focus on when talking about fights. But like all of these specific concepts are in the nuance of things. And they're in like minute little places. So yeah. Alright guys, what did you learn today? Because I have no clue. I just finished editing this video, took a long time, and I'm tired, and I might do a random stream before training today. So any thoughts, leave in the comments down below. Let's discuss this, let's have fun. Martial arts are supposed to be fun. That's about it. Thanks for watching guys, take care.